I'd reached burnout and I was done with self-abandonment as love, burnout as leadership, and survival mode as life. And I really started to step back from that and go, hold on. And the turning point was turning 39 and going, I don't want to enter my 40s the way I've done my 30s.
Welcome everybody to the Impact Policy Podcast. My name is Sam Johnson. I'm the Managing Director here at Impact Policy, and today's episode I'm joined by Chantel Thompson. Chantel Thompson is a Barkindji woman. She's based out in Mildura. She's a professional speaker. She's run a not-for-profit organisation, and she's a 3-time world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So she's somebody who we've spent the better part of an hour having a fantastic conversation about her story, her journey, and where she's going to from here. So I really hope you take some value out of this, some motivation, some inspiration, and thank you so much for listening to the episode. I might start by handing it over to Chantel. And for those of you that don't know, for those of us listening that don't know who you are, maybe just a little bit about who you are, where you're from, who's your mob, and all that sort of stuff.
Geez, we could be here all day with that. No, I also just want to begin by acknowledging that I'm on Gadigal country. I'm a visitor here, and just being on country in different communities that have had to fight so hard to still be here. Like doing these acknowledgements and paying our respects to the elders and the knowledge keepers who came before us, but who are that continuation of culture, and especially for those of us that live off country, is so important because it reminds us that we're still here. We're the oldest living continuous culture. And for me, every time I'm doing that acknowledgement, it gives me that little bit of a pause now to go, I get to do things that my mum and my nan never got to do. I get to be a proud black woman in a way that they didn't get to do. And paying that respect to being on Gadigal country and the leaders of this community, but also to wherever people are listening, it's an act of ceremony, but it's also an act of responsibility to ground ourselves in intention. And I think that's one of the most powerful things about our mob and our culture, is being the oldest living people in the world, or continuous people in the world, is our level of connection and that practice where it's so simple but yet it's so sophisticated in making us just stop and pause and go, well, hold on, what are we here to do, and who are we in the work that we're doing? But for us, it's also that responsibility of going, what seeds are we planting, what ripples are we creating in doing that business? So yeah, I just want to acknowledge my old people, Barkindji and Ngiyampaa, and thank the people that have held me in my cultural journey, and more recently, the people who have come on board to teach me and hold me accountable, like Auntie Marianne and Uncle Maxie, of two elders that I've connected with more recently, who are connected to my family line, and kind of learning things about my mum and my family and that I haven't had the opportunity to learn from. And there's one thing to learn about being Aboriginal, but if you have the privilege of knowing where you come from, and knowledge holders and people in your family who know your story and your lineage, and this is something I'm learning a lot from the Māori community. Jeremy Nikita, who's one of my mentors and big brothers, he talks about the responsibility of, there's a difference between being Māori and doing Māori, and like learning your culture and learning where you come from, particularly if you have the privilege of knowing where you come from, I think is something that isn't talked enough in our circles. So I just want to acknowledge that and acknowledge the people who I can learn from, and just grateful to be here today.
Mad. Well, thanks for that. Thanks for building on that acknowledgement and sharing that bit of yourself with our community. I guess a bit more deeper into that sort of stuff, like who is Chantel Thompson? Can you tell us a little bit about your story, for those that don't know you, and take us down that path for a bit.
Yeah, so who is Chantel right now is evolving. Like it's a question that I'm asking myself. 2019 and back, I'm very certain of who Chantel was, and then 2020 to 2023 to 2024, life just took a different turn that I wasn't expecting. Like I had another baby. I separated from a 20-year relationship, finally started to acknowledge to myself but speak the truth about the domestic violence that I was experiencing, and not understanding what speaking my truth and just trying to be myself in my own life what it would bring with it, those experiences. And it feels like 2026 is where I'm finally strong enough past those experiences of everything that came with that time. I'm just still grateful to literally just be alive and to be going, I'm feeling like myself again. But this journey of just being allowed to be myself in my own life and experience, and what that actually takes, has taken me on a journey I never thought would happen. So pre that, my name is Chantel Thompson. I'm a proud Barkindji and Ngiyampaa woman. I'm known in my community as the Barkindji warrior. I'm a very proud mum of 5 children. My children range in ages from 19 down to 4, Anish, and to many more. And I'm the founder and the matriarch behind the Kilana Foundation, and more recently the Warrior Heart Movement. So Kilana is a women and youth organisation that I started. I've been doing the work since I was about 17, but it really took a different turn in 2020 when I left Melbourne, moved back home to Lachi country, and saw a gap in the community space where a lot of our services were geared towards more that crisis and case management to address a lot of those higher needs, but a lot of those, I guess, crisis points of needs, rather than that proactive sort of space. And as I have kids myself, and I was talking to a few young mob, and there were no spaces where our kids could just hang out to just be themselves without the label of being a leader or an at-risk kid. So from that, we started just running a mentoring and culture and dance program, and that's been going for about 5 years, and it's taken on different shapes or forms, but it's about creating a space where our young mob and our women can come together to connect to culture, to story, to being well, and to figure out who they are beyond the noise of their life, but also the narrative that everyone tells them it is. And the Warrior Heart is my story. It's about what I've had to do to become myself. So I've got 3 degrees. I've got a degree in arts and education, a postgraduate degree in trauma. I'm a 3-time world champion in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a black belt. So I've been doing Jiu-Jitsu for 23 years. I've been competing for 15. And all of that accumulates to, I was just trying to figure out how to find my place in the world. Like my life, the Western world was telling me that I was allowed to be this version, or these were the things that were available to me. But then I had this ancestral pull that my life was bigger than what was happening in front of me. Like mum and dad did the best they could, but we had like drugs and alcohol. My dad had 3 serious relationships before I was 18. I'm the second eldest of 18 siblings. So I helped raise some of my younger siblings. So I've been a parent from a really young age. And my mum and my stepmom, I've never had that kind of consistent sort of mother figure that helped guide me in how to be a mum and all that. And all of this kind of came together to go, I need to figure out who I am, because I didn't want my kids to become victims of my trauma and dysfunction. And not to say that I've eradicated that completely, but being an Indigenous woman and being a mother are the seed and the source of how I move through the world. But now more than ever, understanding that who I am and how I show up for myself ripples out into how I show up as an Indigenous woman and as a mother. And then everything else that comes off of that is really brought me home to this being well as a responsibility, and understanding who we are and how we move through the world cuts through so much noise, but it's really hard to do with the current state of the world. So right now, who is Chantel is a question that I'm allowing to unfold in its own time.
Yeah, I love that. I love the different threads as part of that journey, and particularly the timeline that you talked to there, and a few different timelines there that you reference, since 2020, but also, going back 20 plus years, in the sport of jiu-jitsu, and all your accomplishments in that world sort of there too. You've talked about, you've been very open publicly about, your story, your history, and all that sort of stuff. And it just makes me want to lean into maybe reflecting on what's been one of the hardest points of your journey so far. Maybe it's right now, who knows? But what are some of those really tough times of that story, and how did you move through it? And if there's a moment in there that you would like to share to someone listening that might be experiencing something similar, or any sort of wisdom coming off the back of that sort of experience.
Well, if you can't see, I'm already tearing up because it's not something that I'm on the other side of. It's something that I think when I look at who we are as Aboriginal people and mothers, like what I grew up with as an example, but also what I was, I guess, socially conditioned is that everyone else has to come first. And you see these women, and our women like love our men, but our women, like, they're the ones that birth the babies and they do so much for everyone. And yet so many are burning out. Like, so many of our most amazing leaders, the ones that get seen, but also the ones that don't, you see how stretched thin they are. And I really start to question what gets sacrificed for them to be able to do all of that, and where did they matter in that? And I guess as someone who's been, probably the wound that hurts the most is in this season is my mother wound, both as a daughter but also as a mother, because having been a mum now of my own physical children for 20 years this year, like, that's insane. Like, my oldest is in university, but as someone who does share my story quite openly, and I share it because I want others to see what becomes possible, but my achievements don't mean anything if they don't allow me to be a better person in the world, or me doing what I'm doing then allows me to be a better mother or a better community person, like, whatever that looks like. But people say they want your truth, but me speaking my truth has cost me my children. I can count on one hand how many people I could pick up the phone to and speak my truth to, and they'd be able to sit with it. Whether it's my darkest moments or me being able to say, hey, I just won a world title, or I just landed a $30,000 contract, and all of it would be welcome. And that was quite confronting, how much of myself I was giving to others, but then when I wasn't in a position to give that anymore because I'd reached burnout, and I was done with self-abandonment as love, burnout as leadership, and survival mode as life. And I really started to step back from that and go, hold on. And the turning point was turning 39 and going, I don't want to enter my 40s the way I've done my 30s. And I didn't realise, like, I knew that Marianne Williamson quote, or it might be Maya Angelou, like, when we know better, we do better. I call bullshit. A lot of people know better, but they don't do better. Yeah. But looking back at my own journey, I was like, I knew probably in my early 30s that my relationship wasn't the best or the healthiest. And I tried to leave multiple times for different reasons. But I didn't necessarily have the capacity or the capability or the strength to follow through on what I knew. And I was beating myself up for going, well, you're this person over here, but you're not at over here. And I couldn't live in this half life anymore, like being allowed to be this person over here, but not being my full self. So yeah, like finally recognizing or not being able to ignore any longer that I was in a domestic violent relationship and even speaking that truth, but then other people sitting back in silence or people not being able to be with my truth, and then how many people I've lost along the way just absolutely broke my heart. Like, and then just to, like, that literally took me out, because 39 when I was turning 40, and then my mum died at 42. So me hitting 42 last year was a big milestone for me to go, hold on, if I get a chance to even live, my grandmother who raised me, she passed away at 95. Like, if I get to live that, that's a whole nother life. So I get to do this differently, and trying to carry grief and healing while also this, just gonna fuck around and find out. Like, I'm done with carrying shit that's not mine, but also I'm done with trying to be everything for everyone when I'm not well within myself. And I think that there's this, being well is seen as a luxury or an afterthought. Like it's, I'll exercise, I don't have time to exercise, or I don't have the time to eat well and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, well, hold on. You don't have time until you don't have time, right? Yeah. With chronic health conditions, and with me looking into more recently like complex PTSD and being neurodivergent and all these sort of other things, it was like, and being very high performing. And I think women like me, we get rewarded for being high performing. Like our trauma plays out differently. Like perfectionism and people pleasing looks different because we win world titles and we get degrees and we get applauded for that. But then when you really strip it back, it's like, how does that feed your soul? Is that aligned to what you know is your truth type thing? So for me, 42 was a big permission to go, I fought, I'm still here. I almost didn't make it here when there's so many people who, like my mum's not here, so many other people, we lose so many people every single day. What am I going to make that mean? And how complex being a parent is, because it doesn't come with a rule book. And for me, my promise was that my kids would never have to go through what I went through. But at the time, I didn't have the support to stop and look 5 or 10 years down the track and think about what I was doing now would mean then. But also, when you only get one side of the story, or only one person's allowed a thing, and in order to be allowed to be in someone's life, you have to be this version of yourself, and to go, actually, I don't want to do that. That's probably been the hardest thing. And for anyone that is trying to find their way, or they know that who they are and where they're at just isn't it. Like their truth is just, it's getting a little bit louder every day, and they know that what they're doing isn't for them, and who they've become has either been for survival or safety or something like that. It's that find your people who can be there for you, but also can hold you accountable to what you need to do to be well. Because now I'm 42 and I'm finally feeling like I'm rebuilding myself, and I've got more strength and capacity. I've now got to look up and look at the consequences of the last 5 years, and with my finances, my business, my relationships, and go, well, while I was unwell in all that noise, and some of it wasn't my fault, it was circumstances that were bigger than me, I now have to take responsibility to clean that up, to look at what I need to do to create space, to create more capacity, but also to build foundations for what the next season looks like. And for me, it was just finding your people, finding that purpose, that reason why that's bigger than what you're going to go through. And to trust that if the sun rises, that no matter how many times you fall down, if the sun rises, that's another opportunity to just push yourself back up and try again.
Thank you for leaning into that question. People listening and would know that this interview was pulled together at short notice, and so every question you're getting asked straight off the bat, and so your honesty and yourself that you're bringing is it means the world, I'm sure, to many people that are listening. You talked about you leaned into some stuff, particularly around domestic and family violence, which is a really significant issue in the country, particularly across our communities. Yeah. And you had some really important insights and words of wisdom for any other women or partners that might be in similar sorts of spaces. And if you could just speak to any of them that are listening right now and maybe give them a specific piece of advice to think about or lean into, what would that sort of be?
Domestic violence and family violence, and I would even go as far as to say community violence, has been a big experience of mine over the last 5 years. I twice over the last 2 years, I've tried to look for a job locally and I couldn't get a job. And I'm an educated black woman with 3 degrees, 3 world titles, 20 plus years of working experience. I spoke at the United Nations Permanent Forum of Indigenous Issues, like at a global conference last year. Not one local media piece or anything. Like if I wanted to do something with it, I would have to do it myself. And they say ask for help, particularly with women like us, where we're often stereotyped as being like hyper independent and stuff like that. It's not by choice, and being strong isn't a choice. It's just something I've had to do to still be here, and realizing that I wasn't allowed to be myself in my own home, in my most sacred relationships. And when I started to peel back who I was and what my truth was, and I started to share that with those closest to me, and then I started to realize that me choosing myself would mean that other people wouldn't necessarily choose me alongside, that absolutely shattered everything in me. And as an Aboriginal woman and as a mother, like I never imagined that would be a part of my story, but my relationship with my children is reflective of my mother's relationship with me, my mother's relationship with her mother, and then my grandmother's with her. So particularly that older daughter relationship is 4 generations. And I was like, that was a big eye opener. What I would say to people is that what is role modeled and what we're educated is domestic and family violence, particularly for our mob, isn't always what's on paper. Because there's different, I didn't recognize it because I wasn't the woman crying in the corner with the financial abuse and all that sort of stuff. Like I was the main income earner. Like the physical stuff wasn't a problem because I was doing jiu-jitsu and all that. It was more the emotional and mental side of things, and like coercive control and narcissism. I didn't really understand these terms or know about them until I started working with these girls through Kilana. And then I was like, they was coming to me like 13-year-olds in coercive relationships, and I was getting all up in my feels about it. And I was like, well, I've got to do something about it and educate these girls, because that's always been... So Kilana means growing in Barkindji. And I looked at all the issues in our community and I was like, well, I'm no more passionate about suicide than I am family violence, because they both are experiences that I've had. And I was like, well, if you can empower an individual to have a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose that is bigger, but also a sense of who they are in the world, then that can allow them to manage or overcome the things that they're experiencing and manage themselves, like that self-leadership sort of thing. And when I started looking into this, I was like, at first, for the first 6 months, I completely ignored that little tingle in the back of my head that was like, hold on, there's something else bigger here, that I was experiencing elements of that myself. Totally. Is that you probably already know, but knowing who your people are, but also that you're going to have your own back, because sometimes, like, I'm a very high functioning woman, I've got a profile, and living in a regional community, that's the thing that broke me the most, is that I couldn't go for local support.
Yeah.
Because I was too well known, but I was also like, I know these mob who are working in these roles and I don't trust them to keep their mouth shut, or I didn't have a relationship with them. So I had to look for supports that were outside of it. But because I wasn't below the income threshold, but because I wasn't this woman who fit this stereotype, one, I gaslit myself that I wasn't in it, but also the resources and the supports weren't there for someone like me. So my advice would be to people that are going through this, one, and I perpetrated family violence myself. Like I'll own that, like not consciously, but when I look back and go, well, hold on, I contributed to my own circumstances, was I needed to get real with myself, and I needed to educate myself on what this actually was, but then also how was I going to manage it, but also what did I need to do to keep myself safe, and then my kids, because at the end of the day, they don't have a say in this. Like, if whatever environment we as the main parent or carer choose to stay in, it is a choice at the end of the day. And that's not victim blaming. This is my truth. I stayed for far longer than I should have. That was healthy for me and my ex-partner. Like, we separated multiple times. We were separated pre-COVID. Then we got back together, had another baby. And the same things that were, the same problems were there. They just became more amplified to a point where I was like, I can't live like this anymore, and I don't want this future for my kids or myself. So I had to educate myself. I had to know who my people were, but then I found out that my people weren't my people, and that broke me a little more. Like I tried to suicide during that time. And an incident happened and people didn't believe me, and I internalized that. And then the ancestors pulled me back. But the hardest thing was that I went to the hospital to get help, and I got the help I needed that time, but I got released too soon. So 3 months later, I was in the same position, but I caught myself and I went for help. And I'm standing here at the hospital, like Ward 5, trying to check myself in for mental health support. But because I could talk, I was educated and I looked well, they're like, you don't belong here. I'll just go home and call 13 Yarn. Now, I've called 13 Yarn. The counsellor on the other end of that didn't have the skill sets to meet my level of what I was going through. Like, I wasn't in drugs and alcohol. I was very high performing, high functioning, running a business and stuff, but I'm ringing up for this type of support. I ended up hanging up on 2 of them and I was like, fuck it, no one gets me. Yeah. So I've had to take responsibility to go find that thing that is bigger than me, that is worth fighting for, to trust that this isn't that there is another side to this, but I just have to move through this. But ignoring this or masking or performing over this is just going to this is going to bleed out. But when I realized, and this was only 3 or 6 months ago, that my experience with my kids and the example that I'd had as a mother and as a partner was like 4 or 5 generations long. I was like, this ends with me. Regardless of how my kids choose to take that and what they make that mean, I can't control that now. But as long as I can live with myself, that was more important to me. And even if I had to walk this damn journey alone, physically, I knew my ancestors had my back. And I think that's been the biggest thing of going, I know how many people look to my story. And because I do share my story so openly, it's not because I have random people who contact me and they say, hey, that thing you shared 3 months ago really helped me out of a dark spot. And I'm strong enough to take on other people's opinions. It's like, at this age now, I'm like, unless you're here walking with me and there's a level of reciprocity and responsibility in our relationship, I couldn't give a shit what you think of me.
Totally.
Because it's more important what I think of myself.
100%.
And then the people whose journey I am in responsibility with, because my journey affects theirs and vice versa. Outside of that, it's none of my business. And there's been a level of freedom to that, but I've had to, and this is why the warrior heart stuff comes in, because the heart doesn't lie. The heart bypasses ego, but it also bypasses trauma. And sometimes we victimize ourselves. I say to the kids, like, you're grown and hairy. Like, a lot of our kids know their rights, but they don't like to know their responsibilities. And I think a lot of adults are the same. But then also some people like the smell of their own shit. Like, it's like healthy, right? You know, mob who sit there, not just mob, but people in your world, and they go, oh, I want to do what you're doing. And for me, I'm like, well, how much water do you drink? And then people turn around and say something dumb like, I don't like the taste of water. And yet they're low income, and I'm sitting there going, well, you do you, because I'm just going to go back over here. I'm done rescuing people. I'm like, I have all this knowledge and skill set, and I'll help anyone. But I had to realise that in order to help others, I had to make sure that I was helping myself first, and that my roots and my system, the seed and the ripple that I was putting out into the world was well, and that being well is a responsibility, and owning my shit is a responsibility. And that means getting my finances sorted, because the body and the bank balance don't lie, they keep the score. You can wish, you can manifest all you like, but when you wake up in the morning and how your body responds is an result of how you showed up over the last 3 to 6 months. Your bank balance is the same. And for me, that's what really started to turn it around. Is I needed to own my shit. I needed to see it as a responsibility, but I also needed to know what I was fighting for and who I was fighting for. And that's been the thing that's allowed me to keep speaking my truth and to just hold myself through this next season. And like I said, not knowing who I am and not knowing what comes next is really scary, but it also creates a lot of space for me to just go, I'm just going to let life and the ancestors guide me for a little while, because I don't know.
Yeah, there's so much wisdom in there, so much different threads that you leaned into as part of that story. I think some important ones, particularly around your story and your experience with domestic and family violence, is the reality around access to services. And you're living in a regional community, I'm sure it's even more heightened. We're recording in Sydney City today, and I'm sure it's still an issue here in an urban environment, let alone a regional town. And so I think your experience and what you're talking to, I'm sure, probably resonates with a lot of other people that might be in a similar experience in a similar community, and why it's so important that access to services are that they are accessible, they're equitable, and inclusion is a priority in terms of getting the help that you need when you need it most. I think you sort of made reference to an important point, which I think is important to lean into as well, is that you sort of said, like, I was a perpetrator at times as well, and I think that can be a reality in relationships, but it doesn't excuse the fact that you're also a survivor as part of that story as well. And so that doesn't dismiss or diminish that experience of that as part of that journey either. And I think it's important, and I think I'm really glad that you sort of made reference to that, because it gives an authenticity to your experience, that I'm sure resonates with people that are listening to. It's relationships are intimate and they're complex, and they go around many different paths and threads, but the most constant message through much of that is that that find your people piece as well, which is easier said than done, I'm sure.
But it's a fight worth doing, I think. Like, we're not meant to be in isolation, and even when I did feel alone, I was never truly fully alone, but some of it I did to myself. And it's also being, like, the reason I speak my truth is because I hope it helps someone else, but speaking my truth it comes with a cost. Like, I share my stories, like, every day. I share a minimum of 3 to 4 stories, because I love just chucking the camera on and yarning or sharing what's going on. And yet when I go silent or I disappear from social media, that's probably when I'm having a hard day, right? I've seen people watch my stories who have all the resources culturally, physically, or from people that are in my life, watch me sharing that I'm struggling, yet not pick up the phone. And that's been a really big eye-opener in terms of finding your people. It's like, find the people who are going to hold you in your greatest pain, but also going to hold you accountable to your greatest power and potential. And that is what has made the difference, is people who want to see me win, but also they're out here doing it themselves. I think that was what shifted for me, is going, all these things become available, and with everything that I've already achieved, right, I've done more in 40 years than most people would do in a lifetime. And I could rest on my laurels. Like, I could build a global speaking platform with what I've already done. I mean, my book coming out is called Suicide to World Champion. Like, I'm 3-time world champion. But now I'm like, but I did that out of survival mode. I did that out of all these other things. What comes next is personal, but it's like, what legacy do I want to leave behind? But it's not this legacy when I'm dead and in the ground or back in the dream time. It's like, every room that I walk into, who am I when I walk into that room? What is my business for being here? But also, what am I going to take from this room when I go? And I think with speaking about, the reason I want to speak about domestic violence and stuff is because my experience was so different, is that I was earning money, I was running a business, I was still training and competing and doing all these things, but I didn't even know that I was in that. And being a higher profile woman, I was like, well, our experiences are different, but they're just as important to speak about because they are different. And I think the resources that are out there they don't lean into it. It's very much that real crisis community point, and that's still prevalent, but there's also other layers to it. And I think we're not educating our kids about this, of going, well, this, and it's happening more, but I think there's still a shame factor and still a level of silence to it in our communities around going, especially high profile families and stuff like that, around the actual experience or the perpetration of family and domestic or even community violence. I mean, we've got treaty in Victoria, and I've seen some stuff that's come out on the top of that, and it's lifted the veil on a few things. And I was like, but as mob, we've never had a chance to heal. We've never had a chance to sit down and look at what is our cultural responsibility, what is actual cultural leadership. And you can beep this out if you have to, but before you fucking step up to lead, make sure you're leading yourself first. And I'm not saying I'm doing it perfectly. I have hurt people that I love. I've made mistakes, especially over the last couple of months. I've made some questionable choices and just winging it and just going, oh, she'd be right. Like, it's more important to get it done rather than making sure that the baseline is well, making sure that the people you're responsible for are well. And I then had to stop and go, hold on, I can't do this anymore. I've got to make sure that the woman who is leading is that my love, my life, my leadership and my legacy are all built on the foundations of being well and 100%. Responsible and going, well, what's within my control? Make sure I'm taking responsibility for what's genuinely within my control, not making excuses or justifications, particularly when that harms other people or it doesn't set other people up for success that are on the tail end of what you do and who you are.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, thanks for playing a straight bat and calling it as it is. I think, you know, the first half of this yarn, we've really lent into where you've come from and what you've been through. And I sort of want to pivot now and look at the shift around from surviving to thriving. And lean into some of that strengths-based yarn around, you know, where we're going from here and all that sort of stuff as well. So, so moving on from that, sort of when did a lot of stuff start to shift for you internally? You know, you lent into different parts of your story that, you know, particularly over the last, you know, half a decade have been really tough. But when does this stuff start to shift for you? You know, what's powerful? What are those tools? And yeah, let's start to go down that road a little bit.
I think I started to awaken to what needed to shift, but being able to actualize that, like being able to actually work on it, I didn't understand the gap there. And I think there's a gap even with what you said, like going from survival to thriving. That's a big gap. How about I learn to live first?
Yeah.
And like redefining what that looks like. And so in the last 12 months, like learning about things like nervous system regulation, because like mindset, I'm not too bad. Like, I mean, I've gotten to where I've gotten to, but my mind is full of a lot of scar tissue with things like PTSD. I don't remember a lot of people. And I was like, okay, why is this happening? Like, I'm coming into perimenopausal age. I'm now in my 40s. Like, life looks very different. But as a woman who is building a personal brand business, like relationships is everything, right? So not being able to remember people ain't good for building business, because it's who you know, not what you know type thing. So when you're not remembering people, it's not really setting you up for them people to want to open doors and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what really started to shift for me was when I found this relationship between who I was, who I'd become, and who I was becoming. Like, in terms of being able to be my own coach, my own sort of elder and all that sort of stuff, but also my own parent, if that, like having to parent myself through moments of meeting myself, particularly when I was conscious. Is like, health is probably the easiest one. I know bread does not serve me well. I'm gluten intolerant. It makes me fatigued, get a sore gut, all these things. And yet it's comfort food, especially for mob, like fresh cooked bread with butter and stew and everything else. But it's like, it's that comfort side of things, and it's cultural and all that sort of stuff. But then it's like, hold on, now I've got this knowledge that something that I eat isn't good for me. So get into their moments where I get up or I get triggered, and it's a hard day, and I've had a row with my kid, and I start spiraling. And through the last 2 years, I would have weeks where I'd be just like on the go, like business building momentum's happening. But then my nervous system, something would feel unsafe, and I would disappear off social media. I'd stop all the momentum, and I'd go and lay in bed for a week at a time, because I was feeling suicidal ideation was there, the depression, the anxiety, and just not being able to face the world. And I'd have the biggest bag of Doritos and chocolate and 4 pieces of toast. That was my comfort food. And I'd disappear for a week up to 2 weeks at a time. The only thing I'd do, I wouldn't even shower. Like, it was just, that was my spiral. But where it started to shift for me was like, well, how can I shorten the fall? How can I meet myself? Like, because I don't have the funds for therapy. I don't have the funds for because on paper I earn above the threshold, but it doesn't account for the story around where all that sort of stuff. So I didn't fit the normal sort of metrics of the supports that are there, I didn't qualify for them. And then the supports that were free, I was like, these mob don't know how to sit with my story, because they're not like high enough level to be able to meet me where I am. Was simplifying. It was like, okay, I don't want to be this person anymore, and I don't necessarily know where I'm going, but it's like, what can I do to meet myself here and build self-awareness, but also build the strength to hold my own hand, to choose my power and my purpose and my potential over my pain and my past. And in those moments coming back to bread, it'd be like I'd go to the fridge and I'd be triggered and I'd be all the things, and I'd sit down at my computer and I'd have my list of things to do, and then I'd look up and 5 hours is gone and I've done nothing with it. And then the shame and the spiral would happen again. And it was just kind of this chicken or egg, like, which comes first? How do you stop the pattern?
Yeah.
So I'd get to the fridge and I'd be like conscious, and it's like, okay, you want to eat bread, but you know it's not good for you, and you know that it's going to make you feel good in a minute, but then you're going to have the shame and the gut and the health and everything. So what I did, I started compromising with myself. It was like, okay, this is an addiction. You can have one piece of bread instead of the 3. And then instead of that, have alongside that something healthy like fruit or kapapuku or yogurt, the things that make me well. So I'm walking this line now where I'm addressing those withdrawals from those patterns and behaviors that have kept me in survival mode, and learning how to live and be present with myself. So in the morning, it looks like I've got a song that I play as soon as I wake up, because I know if I get too much in my head, I get stuck.
What's the song?
It's a song called Good Morning Beautiful by China Styles, but then there's the Goromal music as well. Like, it just, singing in language, it just pulls me out of myself. And so creating a morning routine that I'm like, if I only do this 15 minutes well and I stick to that pattern, I can start to rebuild myself. But that nervous system and learning about that physical stuff and learning this next layer of neuroscience and things like that, I was like, oh, okay, like my body will choose what is familiar over what is good for me. So my body will go to bread as a safety thing, because that's what feels good, that's what feels normal, that's what soothes me.
You've probably been doing it since you was a child. And
bread, you grew up on bread, right? Our income and stuff like that was, if you had always had something to eat, it was usually bread and butter. So yeah, it was kind of like, that was where I'm at now, is kind of like going, if this is who I've been and the story that I've got for the last 40 years back, and this is me being brave enough to go, I'm moving at the pace of peace and trust. So for people that have got kids, my cultural journey is very much like Moana. I feel the ancestors calling me. I feel like some of our people have forgotten who we are. We had to do this for safety because of colonization, but colonization is 230 years old. When you think about being the oldest living culture in the world, like that's a surface level thing. I was at the Luwicha conference last year, and there was a Māori auntie, and there was a panel around how do we eradicate racism out of the healthcare system. And she said, that's the first problem. She goes, even the name of this panel, how do we stop racism in the healthcare system? She goes, we're still centering the problem as the focus. She goes, what is the vision? What is a healthcare system without racism in it? That should be the name of this panel. And then we go, oh, well, what gets in the way of that? Racism is one of the things. And it's like decolonization versus indigenizing things. When I come back to my culture, when I come back to who am I as a person and knowing myself, and when I come back to going, what is important to me? What am I willing to die on a hill for? Like literally that warrior in me is not willing to settle for anything else. It's like, I don't want this to be my kid's story. Like if I go on suicide, what's my kid's legacy going to be? My mum, and it might not be a conscious thing, but unconsciously it's like, wasn't I enough for my mum to fight for? Like, wasn't I enough to keep her here? My mum had her addictions and my mum had her challenges, and I acknowledge how hard her life is, and as a mother I can understand. But the daughter in me sat back and go, Mum, you could have fought. You could have chose something different. Same as my dad. Like my dad's he fought really hard. He raised me as a single white man, being an Aboriginal kid, and he never once told me I wasn't allowed to be Aboriginal. My dad let me go off, run around with all the black kids and everything, and he was a white man raising Aboriginal kids, and he faced his experiences. But Dad also made his choices as well that my parents did what the best they could, but it always didn't keep us safe or give us that stability that we needed. And now with perspective and education and stuff, it's like, what do I need to take responsibility for that is mine to own? I can't be the mother my kids need if I'm not being the woman that I need to be for myself. So looking at being well in my body, being well in my mind, and going, okay, you're experiencing these things. How do you manage them? So I'm not trying to eradicate suicidal ideation and these things. It's like, how do I manage myself? How do I manage my addictions and coping behaviors that were once protective but aren't? But my nervous system has probably been the biggest shift in my power.
Okay.
Is learning to just settle my body and recognizing when I'm feeling unsafe, when I'm not breathing well, when I've got tension. And when I go lean into it, I don't even need to know why. It's like, okay, I'm not feeling safe right now. How do I carry safety with me? It's the same as when I'm off country. It's like I carry country with me. I carry culture with me. That's been the biggest shift in this season, is being a black belt world champion. So that's the only world title I haven't won, is black belt world title. Writing my story and getting a book out there. Being the face of my own business, like my business is my brand, is my storytelling. That's all going to become a ripple effect if I'm well within myself and I can just move through the world as I am, because Moana being my cultural journey, Kung Fu Panda is my jiu-jitsu journey. Like I was sitting on the other side of the fence just trying to look through, and then all of a sudden I got thrust into it, and I'm at Kung Fu Panda 3. It's like I'm at my inner peace season. I'm teaching myself to move at the pace of peace and trust, and to have self-respect, to go, when I say I'm going to do something for myself, I follow through. I know I can handle my money, I can handle my time, I can handle my trauma, but I'm leading from the things that are within my power and my potential, because my kids deserve a mum who is well. My kids deserve a mum who, when they get up in the morning, I'm not rolling around in my depression and everything. That when I see them, I see my babies. They deserve a mum who is well, but in order to do that, I deserve a woman who is well. So it's that ripple effect. It's like when I'm well, that just ripples out.
Absolutely. I love that nervous system regulation stuff that you've only just started to tap into. I feel like that's everything. And for people listening, but both me and Chantel share the same love for jiu-jitsu as a therapy,
yes,
as a mode of healing, and as a mode of connection and community and all that sort of stuff. But jiu-jitsu is one of the most brutal martial arts you can do. It's the most popular sort of ground form of combat that you'll see if you don't know jiu-jitsu, but you see the brutal sort of mixed martial arts on TV and UFC. What they do when they fall to the ground more often than not is exactly what Chantel's talking about, having her black belt in. So very brutal, very effective, but also very peaceful, healing martial art. And most people that start jiu-jitsu, over 90% of them will not get their blue belt. There's 5 belts in jiu-jitsu, and of that 10% that get their blue belt, it's estimated that around 1% of that 10 will make it to black belt. Now,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so yourself, your story, your journey, the very fact that you've been able to make it to that level of that journey through such a brutal and beautiful art, and also being a black woman, with your story to go through that, I think is phenomenal. And on top of that, you've also then had that added layer of being somebody who's competed internationally, most recently in New South Wales, 2 times state championship, just recently since we've recorded this. And so I sort of lean into that, so people sort of really understand the gravity of. I'm probably the only podcast host that could talk to the significance of that in terms of the actual sport and different things like that. But I sort of say that because I want to lean into, it's such a big part of who you are.
Yeah.
And it's such, you put a post up on the weekend about, you won, 2 medals at the titles on the weekend. But one of the biggest wins was that there was like 8 or 10 women.
10 black belt women on the mats
competing. And so you're a real advocate for women in sport.
Yeah.
Aboriginal women in sport, but women in sport as a whole.
Yep.
And so I guess I want to lean into why that's so important, why you're so passionate about it, you know, what responsibility comes with being a role model in that world for that sort of space. And I think it's just a really nice sort of, it's a really nice thread that connects a lot of your story, grounds a lot of your story together. And, you know, you said that you've been on the journey for 20 years, so it sounds like it's been a consistent thread through all of the ripples and the ups and downs, you know, that it's been a constant tangent in one way or another. So, yeah, just leaning into some of that sort of stuff, maybe a bit of a reflection on that. And I know that you connected up with Monica McKenzie not too long ago, and she started her journey, but she actually saw that you were in town competing, and she's a fan of the podcast and messaged us and said, you know, try and get Chantel on the podcast while she's in town. So, and then funnily, so she planted the seed, and then I saw you in the shopping centre yesterday. So
I know, that was insane. And here I am with one of my titters, Jody, who's thing, and I was just thinking about you, and then run into you and the babies in the bloody shopping centre in the middle of Sydney. Was insane. But jiu-jitsu is my playtime and my therapy. It's the arena. Jiu-jitsu, entrepreneurship, motherhood and culture have been the threads that have been the most constant. So I grew up fighting. When I spoke at the United Nations Permanent Forum of Indigenous Issues last year in New York, I was sitting there. I'm a little girl that grew up in Denton, New South Wales, and I grew up in a town in the 80s and 90s where you're either black or white. Like, very few were allowed to be just kind of like strong and proud and in the middle. And the world tried to write my story for me before I was even born, like running a non-profit, but also getting speaking gigs. You almost have to prostitute your trauma. You have to prostitute the adversity you've been on to justify the level of funding you get. To almost justify the power that I bring. Like, you just read my resume. If I walked onto a speaking gig stage next to any speaker in the world and they just read my bio, I wouldn't even need to say anything, and it could shift people. To my knowledge, and if anyone out there knows, please come to me and tell me and prove me wrong, because I'd love to be proven wrong. To my knowledge, I'm the only 3-time Indigenous World Champion, male or female, in the world in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Like, 3-time World Champion. And the really powerful thing about my story is that I wasn't 15 when I started. I wasn't some talent ID'd kid from the bush who go into a sporting code where there's nutritionists, there's coaches, there's trainers, right? Yeah. There's a system behind it. Even now at jiu-jitsu, I was 27 when I started competing. So I found jiu-jitsu at 19. So I grew up fighting. My story isn't one where I was scared for my life and then I started something to protect myself. I grew up fighting. Like, that wasn't the thing. And I was already strong and powerful. Jiu-jitsu and culture kind of intersected at the same time, where that responsibility piece of being a matriarch, of the ancestors giving me this sort of warrior spirit of going, mate, you're going to understand. I'm here to stand strong. And I've got the courage to speak. I've got the skill sets. But now that comes with the responsibility to shape it, to train it, to develop it. So at 19, I was getting into fights in nightclubs and looking for trouble and running my mouth as I was. But I was also very protective of other people. Yeah. So a female mentor and auntie sort of said, you're going to get yourself into trouble. You need to go check out this jiu-jitsu. So I walked down to the local thing, and jiu-jitsu was very new in Australia. This was like 2002, 2003. Yeah. UFC had only been around for a couple of years, so it was still growing, and it was very new to Australia. So I was one of the early adopters. Before me at the same time is Sophia Drysdale was the first Australian female black belt, but she was outside of Australia when she got her black belt. Jess Fraser, Livia Giles, Marion Mahaly, like, these are some of the early adopters of jiu-jitsu who have gone on to set the tone for the sport, really. And there are others, but these are the ones I know of. So at 19, to find jiu-jitsu, to go in and go, what's this shit? Like, they're rolling around on the ground. That's what we do in the nightclub, or what we do in community or at home with the siblings. But then, being completely transparent, the guy that I had a crush on at the time was also doing it. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll go and try this out. And he ended up being the father of my kids and my partner. So we traveled jiu-jitsu for 20 years together. Like, that was a core thread of our relationship. But jiu-jitsu being a martial art first and foremost, not the sports side of jiu-jitsu, was something that really spoke to me, that samurai, that warrior, because the gym where I started training at, they also did Kyokushin karate. So I got to brown belt in Kyokushin karate, which is a very hard style of martial arts. There was no concessions because I was the only woman there. So at 19 I was planning on being a UFC fighter. Now I don't think I've said this on a public podcast. So at 20 I was in a really unhealthy position, and my mum had passed away. I failed year 12. I had to go back and repeat. I'd had 2 abortions by then, and I was like, I don't want this dysfunction in my life. I want something more. And I was studying to be a teacher, and I was like, okay, I'm going to move to Melbourne and I'm going to train to be a UFC fighter, and I'm going to finish my teaching degree. Can you guess what I was going to do for a career to fund both those things?
Cockfighting.
Stripper.
Yeah, okay.
In my head, I was like, well, I was good looking. I knew how to swing it. And I was like, well, no one's going to touch me because I've got the skill sets. So it was already that entrepreneurial sort of like sovereignty and self-determination to go, I don't want to have to rely on someone else, because I'd been shown how I grew up and in the world that no one's going to back me more than myself, right? And because I was ahead of the curve and I was talking about things that no one else was talking about, even at home, like, who are you to think that you can do those things? And there was no one doing martial arts in my world, let alone being like high level in any sport. And the other funny thing is that I'm really actually uncoordinated. I don't have much hand-eye coordination, which you wouldn't think so, but my jiu-jitsu just doesn't make sense on paper. My journey doesn't make sense. Like when you look at my story on paper with the adversity that I've faced versus who I've become and the things I've achieved, they don't line up. What lines up is the fact that I heard my ancestors call and I had the courage to walk it. Jiu-jitsu became the arena that shaped me. So at 19 to 24, it was going to be UFC fighter, do all them things, and I had my first daughter. Then it was just fitness and playtime. At 25, I developed severe postpartum depression that then escalated into postpartum psychosis. And I ended up hurting my daughter. If people want to know more about that story, they can just go Google my name. There's a lot out there already. But it was actually the moment where I hurt my daughter, and I tried to get some help from the medical field, and I was told because I was Indigenous and because of what I'd shared with the doctor, they wanted to do a welfare check and they wanted to call the police and wanted me to spend time in a mental health facility. My family has a history of addiction, so I don't like medications and stuff, but my depression wasn't a chemical imbalance in my brain. It was, what do they call it? That social factors, like the psychosocial factors of like I was low income, overcrowding in the house, sort of all these other factors. Jiu-jitsu became the vehicle where I could take responsibility for myself. That's where that responsibility piece kicked in. When I realized who I was hurting my kids, they're innocent in all this. Like, yes, I'm unwell mentally, but I've got a responsibility to step up and do something about it. My kids didn't ask for this. They deserve a mother that's well. So it was actually George, my ex-partner, that he suggested that I start training again. Within 3 months, like I still remember it, he had to drag me to training, kicking and screaming twice a week. I was the only woman there. It was shit. Like, the guys didn't go easy on me, and I got a lot of judgment from people as well, going, your mum, you should be at home. I was 27. Like, you should be home. I was 26 or whatever it was. Like, you should be home with your kids, this and that. And I was all over the place. But after that incident with my daughter, George was like, nah, you need to go back to training. And you need to go back to study. Because you need something outside of being a mum. Like, you need more balance. So going back to studying to do my degree, and starting jiu-jitsu was the thing that started to help me get well. But my twins were sitting on the floor and they were just playing. They were about a year or so old, and one of them just looked back over their shoulder like this at me, and it was like I fell in love with them for the first time. And that's the thing about parenting, and you'd know this. You get this Cinderella script that you're supposed to fall in love with them straight away, but love can develop over time. Like, it doesn't make you a bad person if you don't automatically fall in love with these little people, because it's a big thing becoming a parent. But then 3 to 6 months in, coach was like, we're going to do the state titles, who wants in? And it was the South Australian state titles, and I was like, I want to know who I can become in a controlled environment, because I know I can handle my own. Like, I can protect myself, I can run my mouth, I can do some really powerful things, but what does it look like to channel that, to train it? And that first competition just opened up a whole new world to me. From there, we moved to Melbourne at in 2013, and that began my international career. We trained at Absolute MMA under Tiago Stefanuti, who I got my black belt under, and that's where my journey with competition. And the first time I moved to Melbourne, like I was already competing in Australia. I was one of the top 5 women in Australia competing. I could be wrong, but I think I was the only mother at that level as well. And that's the other thing. Like, I won all my world titles in my 30s as a mum of 4 while working full time and living with what I was living with at the time. And I was the main income earner for the family because George and I decided that we didn't want 2 people going crazy. Yeah. But he was also an international competitor as well. So we were supporting, like I was supporting 2 international careers. We were both building that. So jiu-jitsu's kind of had that early entry point where it was UFC, fighting, self-control. Then it was just sort of a hobby to keep well. And then from 2011 to 2019, it was all about that elite level competition. It was like, I'm going to be a world champion. And in that time, I was also on the Australian wrestling team. I tried out for the Olympics, tried out for the Commonwealth Games. I won like 3 Australian titles in wrestling. Now, it's not hard to be an Australian wrestling champion when there's only 2 or 3 women. Like, I'm not going to make it out to be something it's not. Yeah. But this pathway also opened up a world someone like me, I got to travel the world. And when I was training 2 times a day whilst also being a mum and working. And then I started building a business as well because I had my employer at the time say, you got to choose between your dreams or your thing. And I was like, well, fuck you, I'm going to back myself and starting to put myself out there. 90% of the awards that I have and the media that is out there over the 20-year experience that I've had, I got myself. I contacted people. And that, you know what that comes like with mob. Yeah, you think you are big note to yourself, like crab in the bucket type thing. And I was like, I'm not sitting back waiting for you to sign the check to make my dreams come true. Totally. And that's where I'm at now, is kind of going, well, if these are all the different things that jiu-jitsu meant for me, but competing is the chance to challenge myself. It's my playtime. It's my therapy. Winning world titles is playtime in comparison to healing our trauma, working with our mob, trying to shift perspectives of how people see themselves, but also how the world sees us. So for me, this last weekend was Australian Jiu-Jitsu just pissing me off. They're not recognising the female black belts. Like, we competed at Australian Nationals last year. We made an Australian record. I think we had 10 women competing, again, black belts. And there was 8 women in the Masters 3 division, Sammy. Like, that's over 40. They didn't put Australian Federation of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu didn't put one post up about us. Yeah. And when I contacted them, they said, we're committed to putting up the highest level of jiu-jitsu. I said, so what? Because we're old and we're women, our jiu-jitsu not good enough. I said, I'd like to see the men carry kids and everything else and be back here doing what we're doing. And like you said,
for sure.
And I didn't actually see it like that. Like, I stopped jiu-jitsu in 2019. I thought, you know what, I'm done. I've done some really cool things. COVID's here. So 2020 came and then I had another baby. I got to 144 kilos with my son, and emergency C-section, and I fractured my tailbone. But also living in regional Victoria, I had this narrative in my head, someone like me isn't allowed to do these things. I've got to be a good mum, be a good community leader, and I have to put, like, myself don't matter anymore. But then in 2021, like, not doing jiu-jitsu, not competing, the depression was coming back and everything else. But then my older daughter, because we're a family of jiu-jitsu practitioners, my business was able to partially fund her to go and compete at the World Championships. And watching her compete on that stage, and 2 things, not being able to be there to support her, not having the funds to have that sovereignty and self-determination to be there to support my daughter on one of her biggest moments, but also this hunger to go, hold on, I don't think I'm done yet. Like, I've got unfinished business here. And then my coach came back from Brazil in July of 2023, and he was like, look, I want to give you your black belt. And I was like, I'm not ready for this. I'm not in shape. I haven't trained in 4 years. And he's like, look, you'll grow into it. And he knows me very well enough that if he gives me a black belt, I'm going to make it mean something. I'm not just going to sit and rest on it. So that began my journey. 2 months later, I went and funded myself to compete at the World Masters with 2 months of training. And I figured I got that answer that this is where I'm supposed to be, the story, the journey, but who I become in training jiu-jitsu. But you can't compete in isolation. Like, these women that said yes. Now, I drove 15 hours by myself, and I did something that probably most people wouldn't do, is that with the cost of fuel and everything, my business is only just starting. Like there's a whole heap of stuff there on my business and everything, because I've been focusing on one thing. I'm coming back to this. I came with 1 tank of fuel and $100 in my bag. That's it. When I got to Sydney, I got in at 2 a.m. and I had $10 left in my pocket, and I had 100 kilometres of fuel in the tank. Still don't even know how I'm getting home. Yeah. But I had to back myself. I'm like, I have to see who I can be in this. So when I stepped onto those mats, it wasn't even about beating the other person. It wasn't about winning a world title. It was about me telling myself and showing myself that this dream is here for a reason. The ancestors, this pull is still here, that jiu-jitsu isn't just something that I do as a hobby. It's something that is got a purpose that is bigger than me, even if I'm not quite sure of it yet.
Totally.
And yeah, I ended up winning 2 state titles, and I mean that's amazing in and of itself. But to share that space with the other women, the same thing happened at nationals. I almost didn't make it to nationals. I was like, who am I to do these things? Like the financial commitment, the realistically life and everything else. But then I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to back myself, because I know what became possible with the other stuff that I did. What becomes possible for older women to do sport and be successful while being mums and senior leaders in the community.
Totally.
And then you add the cultural component. Like that's just being a woman. Then you add our cultural responsibility, because when we step up to do things, we got to answer to our elders and our kids and our community. Like you got that extra layer. And I was like, well, I'm also sick of our mob dying young. I'm like, in our community, we lost like 16 to 20 people over a 3-week period across 3 or 4 communities. And it was like mental health, lifestyle choices, family violence, like these were all factors in those deaths. And I'm sick of people going to sorry business. And I was like, well, we got to lead the way first. You got to say, well, look, if I can do it, then it's that permission piece, but also it's that reminder that we have a responsibility beyond trauma. Yeah. We have a responsibility beyond colonial violence and the impacts there. Yes, those things are very real, but what's the work we're doing within ourselves as individuals and as communities to be well again, to go back to our practices and not just talk about it, but to live it, to connect to country, to connect to land and dance. And for us, that's what jiu-jitsu is. It's that culture, it's that community in a different way. If there was a traditional Aboriginal martial art, I'd be there training it. But in this season, this journey to Black Belt World Champion, this is personal. Starting a community on school, like writing a book, telling my story on YouTube and hoping to create like a Netflix type series. Like this is all about going, if another person can see my story and shift their own perspective around what's possible for them, or someone hears my story about domestic violence and it's a perpetrator, male, female, whatever, and they question themselves and go, hold on, what pain am I running from that's causing me to do that? How do I take responsibility?
Yeah, I love that.
To be well within myself, so I don't have to do that anymore. I don't hurt the ones that I love because I'm hurting.
Yep.
Then the ones that are the victims, how do we take responsibility to become strong enough and well enough to leave so that we move from being a victim to a survivor?
Yeah.
And for me, it's learning to live again. Getting on those mats with those women, they all said yes. But also I backed myself. Most of the women that I compete against, they train full time. They have coaches, they have resources. Like I have a coach, but he's in Melbourne. I'm training out of my garage by myself. Yeah. So it's about the story, but this time it's about who am I going to become in the pursuit of this journey, and then what becomes possible for those that I love and serve along the way.
I love that. It's such a beautiful way to sort of pull those threads together. Thank you so much for sharing this part of yourself with us. You touched on a couple of things in terms of where people can go to connect more with you. Can you just tell for people that are listening what you sort of got going on, how best people can engage you, connect with you in all those different parts of yourself?
Yeah, so at the moment I'm super excited. My book, which is long overdue, is coming out in October. It's been 10 years since I've been an entrepreneur in October, so I was like, that's a perfect time for my story to come out. And it's called Suicide to World Champion, and it's telling the story but also the lessons that I learnt along the way of becoming the Barkindji warrior and going from that suicidal ideation and the things where life just felt so out of my control, and what it took for me to rebuild myself, but who I became along the way. The world titles were just an outcome of me fighting for myself. And I've started sharing and logging this journey on YouTube. So talking about entrepreneurship, culture, motherhood, leadership, and jiu-jitsu, and logging that journey so people can hit like or subscribe on YouTube. But as you said, it gets the algorithm going. It creates opportunities. You never know who's going to connect with the story that might need it, that helps them. But yeah, I'm now starting to, in the next 3 months, I'll be relaunching my brand into the world as Chantel, the Warrior Heart, and looking for those brand alignment partnerships and stuff with people who are all about women's empowerment through sport and storytelling, but also for our mob and our girls to step up and go, well, if Annie Shan can, then I can, because it's like, I'm 42, I'm a mum, I'm based in regional Victoria. If I can do this, then it becomes that permission piece. And I think now more than ever, people need hope. People need a sense of permission, but also we need to be accountable to go, this is what's happening in the world, but what's happening in my world and what's within my control. Because when we take that responsibility back, it just opens up so much more. So yeah, I've got my book coming out. You can hit like or subscribe and keep your eye open on that, because I'll be talking about it more, but people can become an early subscriber for the book coming out, and they can join my community on School. So there's a platform called School, SKOOL, where people are creating online communities around their movements, around their stories or their hobbies. And I've created a Warrior Heart community, and we've got some really exciting things coming up. So yeah, you can join the community on School. You can hit like or subscribe, or you can hit me up and I will put you on the list for updates on the book coming out in October.
Wow, exciting times.
Yes, all in the lead up to Worlds 2026, which will be my first attempt at Black Belt World Champion in Las Vegas in September, if the world doesn't implode between now and then. If I can still get on a plane, I'll be... and that's what this competition was. It was a stepping stone in the lead up to Worlds 2026, because I'm like, in the journey to becoming a Black Belt World Champion, I know I'm going to become the best version of myself, and that's what I'm super excited to share with people, is that journey and that story.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you so much, and I'm sure this is the, we've done stuff before in the past and different things like this, and hopefully, whenever you're in town and on this country, you're a big part of what we're doing here and always welcome. So thank you so much for giving us your
thanks
time.
For having me, and thanks to the listeners for being here. It's Sam's had some amazing people on the podcast and is a deadly storyteller. But just super excited to be here and to see what comes next.
Neat. Thanks, Bob.